Another episode of the podcast here, and I have a special guest today with me, James Hansen. I've
That's
known
right.
known you, James, for what is it, 7 years? I think 7 or 8 years. I think now.
Yeah, just about.
Yeah, and James, he's gone to the Aristides Atelier, which is a four-year classical program at the Gage Academy of Art. That was what, from 2013 to 2016, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
roughly. I mean, it's an evolving program. It's been condensed and stretched out and gone back and forth. But yeah, it's. I mean, it's been an awesome experience. I mean, had no regrets really ultimately. But yeah, it's kind of an evolving program to tell you the truth.
yeah, yeah. Well, do you think that's good for something that's artistic related, for something to be, because I've noticed in my teaching that, like, I think about how, like, I don't know how in the world I could teach to, like, a mandated curriculum. Like, it's like I have to be able to change almost constantly. I mean, and it doesn't mean like completely change, but like so they've done a lot of restructuring, you're saying, and trying to figure out what works.
Yeah, because really, if you think about it, Juliet's background is really all over the place. As opposed really to, like, I imagined quite a few students I've talked to that came from, like, Florence, for example. They have, from what I gathered, it's pretty structured, pretty rigid.
Mm.
But yeah, her teachers, obviously, besides, Stephen Assell and Jacob Collins, um, she's had Richard Lack and Carlos Madrid, and I mean,
Mm.
and if you even go back even further, it kind of mainly stems from Gamble.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
she's been kind of all over the place.
Yeah. So that makes for eclectic kind of coming together. I guess before we get heavy into that, um I first came to know you through a mutual mentor and friend, and roommate at the time, Josh, and you guys
Right? Yeah, yeah,
had been talking about about just the education process, and it was a while ago, and it was sort of like, you were
yeah.
trying to
It was kind of a random thing.
yeah.
We had similar tastes in music, and then, I was getting into his paintings, and then, we just delved into, like, just geeked out on, like, mediums and paint and, the technical processes of painting, and it just kind of went from there.
Yeah, and that's when I first came to sort of know you, and I remember um feeling really empathetic because, like, I was sort of in the middle or towards the end of my education, at the Ravenswood, and it was just like exhausting, and I remember thinking, like, back to when I was, like, trying to figure out what path to take, and so you've had a crazy go of it, quite a journey, to through to the Atelier, and you mind talking about that?
No, no, not at all. I mean, yeah, it's like barely scraping by. It's like sink or swim, like nearly like every day. But yeah, it's like the saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah.
But yeah, even then it was like when I knew that I wanted to get training. I mean, especially in with Juliet's Atelier. Um, yeah, it was like just kind of a heaven sent how it just kind of clicked together because it was just, it was really kind of out of my control. Um, but yeah, I was fortunate enough to get the funding at the right time, and I pretty much was like, either I got to do this now or it's never going to happen. So
here's the
when I got
opportunity. Yeah.
right, yeah, well, to tell you the truth, I actually got accepted way back in 2010, and
Okay.
it
Okay.
didn't work out, so I had to I reapplied again in 2012, and yeah, I
Dude,
when
that's
I found out,
crushing. That's crushing. Was that crushing? I mean, I've had that happen to me. That happened to me at Milwaukee. I was trying to go to Milwaukee and I got accepted in, and then everything else fell through and I couldn't do it. And I just remember feeling absolutely devastated. I was like, what am I going to do? Like, because it's attached to art education, which is like the pathway to like enlightenment, in other words, essentially. And then like the door closes and you're like, no, like,
yeah. I mean, not only just even getting accepted, but then actually then doing the curriculum and then balancing that what you've learned and how you're going to apply it. I mean, it's just like a phoenix rising from the ashes over and over and over again. But yeah, when I got accepted, I pretty much just like sold everything that I owned, put all my eggs in one basket and, jumped for it.
Yeah.
And never looked back.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I got there, I pretty much lived there, because I guess in a strange way I kind of made this pact with myself that before I started, that this was going to be it. I'm not going to focus on anything else. I'm going to structure my day so I could draw and paint as much as I possibly could, and only aim the time allotted during the day just to, basically survive. You don't have enough time to eat, sleep, take care of what I need to do, and then just become single pointed for that whole time.
Yeah, definitely. It's good to, I mean, well, you took it seriously as you should, because it's such an opportunity. It's such a, I don't know. I think a lot of people take education for granted if you don't really have to.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was all around me. I mean, when I would try to, explain to people that where I come from, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, and being in Seattle, it's there's a lot of there's a lot of people that kind of sorry to say, but they kind of mistake, privilege for competence,
Oh, of course.
And
yeah,
and coming from a completely, I mean, I grew up there, but I mean, but that was, many moons ago, in Bremerton, which is actually across the pond from the Puget Sound up there. But yeah, it's completely different when I moved back up there, and that explained to people, my story, and, I'd lost count of the amount of hairy eyeballs and looks that I've gotten from them. And it's like, yeah, they didn't get it, but it's like, I'm there to learn as much as I could, because I knew that time was rare, and it goes by so fast.
Oh yeah. I mean, that was coming from Rockford myself, and you're coming from this. I mean, it's not a hodunk town, but it feels like it by comparison to what you're shooting for. And like you're trying to get an art education in an area where no one knows what the hell you're talking about, even. And to the point where like, like, does that even exist? How are you gonna learn that? And then you're there, and then you're in it, and it's like, well, I'm here to kick ass. Like that's
Right.
it's totally what you really have to do. But it's rough. It really is with the balance with work and life and I mean, you have to definitely make sacrifices, like you're saying, like just focusing on absorbing, being in it every single day, but and there's something really great about that with like coming to a place, a studio, especially, I think, because it's creative, that creative element. But everyone, well, you hope everyone is there for really one thing, because they love art, and to be in that environment every day and getting to know, or whether like having the teachers get to know you and get to know your bad habits, and you have this, this relationship comes out of it, and it seems like, you had a really, really good, healthy relationship with Juliet, I think. I mean, it seems like
it grew over time, actually. It's funny. My whole time there, I mean, I pretty much kept it to myself, but yeah, near our graduation ceremony, I pretty much, we all had to make a speech, everybody that was graduating. And I pretty much just let it out and said, pretty much told her, it's like, during my first year there, I mean, she scared the living daylights out of me. I mean, she could just look right through you. It's crazy. It's an indescribable experience. But yeah, she rules that place with an iron fist.
Nice.
Easy.
Nice.
Yeah, but it always wasn't like that. I mean, yeah, it was. I mean, she was very cryptic, I'd say.
Yeah.
Really in our relationship. I mean, it's kind of like reading Nietzsche in a way. It's like there's so much compacted in what she was trying to teach you, as opposed to the TAs around us. That pretty much give everything to you in bite-sized little chunks.
Okay.
And she's coming from way up here. It's the kind of stuff that you'd stew over the weekend. It's like, what the hell was she talking about? And then maybe some odd couple of months later on, it just clicks.
Yeah.
It's crazy how that would just work all the time. It's just, you never could predict it.
No, you never could, but you knew it was coming. And yeah, especially when you're in that environment man, it's indescribable, but it's such a high. It's such a high to be like, you're coming up to a problem.
It's very monastic, easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and especially if the studio is that way, or can be that way too. What was I gonna say? So what is their structure like as far as the teaching goes? Like do you do like the figure in the morning and do you do studies in the Baroque? Does she follow? Because judging by her books, which if anybody doesn't realize, Classical Drawing Atelier and Classical Painting Atelier, 2 books. They're fantastic.
Yeah, they're the latest, the 3rd and 4th book. They're like companion books.
Okay.
Essentially to the first 2.
Yeah.
She kind of breaks it down, a lot more in little smaller exercises. As I found, like her first 2 original books were very esoteric. It's the kind of thing you have to like read over and over and over again before you really can get it. And it's like I'd lost count how many times I read them before I joined the Atelier.
Yeah.
And then looking back and then reading them again, you're like, oh, that's what it means. So, not to dishearten anybody, but it's a complete difference, to taking, going through the program and reading her highly compacted, material.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you had mentioned on your website that you were talking about, or you like using art as a way to discover things about yourself in a very it's almost, and I'm not saying this as a criticism, but in an Eastern almost sort of way. And can you talk about that? Or is there anything maybe that you can give an example that you've been able to work through or discovered about yourself while you were painting? That I know that's really abstract.
Definitely. No, not at all. I mean that makes perfect sense, actually. Because looking back, when I first discovered, her work. I mean, at the time I didn't even know she had an atelier. Before I moved back to Oregon in 2007, before that I was living on my own property in the middle of Arizona, about 40 acres, and it's off grid. And one day I had this old artist magazine, and I saw this tiny little ad. And one day went to the library, because that's where the internet was. We would go, we would make trips once a month. We had solar equipment, wood stove, all that jazz, hauled in our water. So yeah, one day I went to the library and looked her up, and I just instinctively knew that that's where I want to go one day. I have no idea how I'm going to do it, but I just instinctively knew. And I guess, at the time, I was heavily influenced by a lot of Eastern mysticism.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Patanjali, and if you ever read Shunryu Suzuki's Beginner's Mind, that was
I don't think so.
highly influencing to me.
Okay.
The idea about always, pretty much it's encapsulated around the idea of always attempting to see things with new eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No,
and
oh, go ahead.
And besides for a lot of yogic Eastern philosophy, I was really into a lot of Carlos Castaneda, actually. Being in the desert, you can see how it could be very beneficial. But yeah, I can't remember exactly when. I mean, it really hit me. But yeah, just a lot of philosophical Eastern traditions have always kind of been a part of me, and I've always wanted to somehow illustrate or narrate, a lot of experiences that I've maybe that I've experienced there and throughout my life. And I guess somehow, I don't know, I've felt like I wanted to incorporate that in somewhat of like a surrealistic type of way.
Okay. So you're interested in sort of like the surrealists and sort of like bending reality and nature to sort of fit whatever narrative you're thinking about.
Right. But not really so much like in the way you think of surrealism, like in Dali or Magritte, but definitely having that, I don't know, I guess maybe really more of a type of kitsch type of perspective. Maybe in the same way that that there's really no way of escaping kitsch. It's kind of inevitable.
Yeah, you think, and so you're referring to sort of the kitsch that we know out of Nerdrum, right? Sort of like
right.
that anything, just for anybody who's not aware. So for anything that isn't, let me see if I get the argument correct. Correct me if I'm wrong. Anything that historically everything was commissioned through the church, for instance, through major commissioners, and it wasn't until recently that it started to not be like that, and so anything that is not that is essentially what he's talking about, kitsch, which is just for decoration, is it? Or am I getting this right?
Well, I'd say roughly, but I mean, kind of like attempting to describe how that the more we attempt to escape from it, I guess, the more we attempt to try to detach from the very fact that no matter how we perceive something, it's still confined. Its parameters are still confined. We never could necessarily perceive anything independently of itself.
Yeah, and that's I've been really into meditation, and I studied Buddhism, both Mahayana and Zen, for about 3.5 years, really intensely. And I to this day I liken doing art and painting as to be a very much a Zen approach, in that, like, you get the cheesy Matrix, like there is no spoon thing, and when I talk about like shapes, like how you have to, change your perceptual outlook, right? And force yourself to forget that you aren't perceiving a face. You're perceiving shapes and colors that come together, and if you don't focus on the face just becomes. Yeah, and the more you don't focus, so that's just reacting, right? And that gets into the whole like archery, like with Zen, with like that I took to that like crazy. I was like, holy shit, it's just a reaction. It's a state of flow and reaction. And the same thing can happen with art, where it's like you need to get into that state once you have a certain level, right, of knowledge. and then you can get into this state of flow and reaction and perception and the intellectual side where it's like, this is a face that's only going to hurt you,
Right.
when you're in that.
I guess maybe in a sense, like the only way really for that to come is essentially until you reach a point where a lot of these basic principles become almost like bodily knowledge, like instinctive, kind of like martial arts, when you're being attacked and all of a sudden the guy like breaks the guy's arm in 7 different places and he didn't even think about it. It just becomes reactive.
Yeah. Second nature. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And it's,
I felt that especially in Life Room. It just became like the key to the universe to me, not to sound, not to sound strange, but yeah, it just was, it's like everything became a fractal, everything was connected to everything else. And
yeah.
It just
I joke about that. I just made that joke in my class last week that like you need to be a conspiracy theorist with your drawing. You need to see all the connections. You have to believe that everything connects to everything else, and then you have to see how that happens so that you can. It's so funny though because it's like you gotta connect all the dots.
Right, without appearing like what's his name from. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Yeah, exactly. The hair's all crazy and yeah. So that's kind of a monastic life just in itself, living off the grid. What is that like? Not a lot of people have that experience of living off the grid.
No, it was I guess a lot of it looking back, it really helped me approach the Atelier training, especially in the first year. I mean, the first year is always the hardest, albeit even it being, nothing but drawing. Just having to have that ability to, remain focused for so long, for extended periods of time, can be completely just draining for most people. Besides the sacrifices, you lose a lot of friends and you lose connections with family and, you tend to starve yourself and,
forget TV and movies. You go like, I remember I missed all of South Park just from college to the Atelier. And it was like, when I got out of the Atelier, I was like, oh man, I can watch South Park. It was such a strange thing. It was like, but it was like everything. It was like you could emerge out of this cave. Like what,
blinking a few times. And it's, I've had, similar experiences too. I mean, I remember like my typical day was like, I would get there at like 6 and then not leave till midnight, and then catch up on sleep on Saturday and then do it all over again. I mean, like no cooking, everything was like, had to be like, it was like pre-made, or even if I did cook, I would cook everything up like, one day and then freeze it, or you're constantly like thinking of like all different ways that you could crunch your time together so you could put in as many hours as you can behind the easel. That was just me, but I mean,
I'm living off the grid sort of forces that kind of mentality, that same kind of mentality that like you need to really thrive in that kind of school. Right. Yeah.
Being able to stretch out, making the most out of what little that you have.
Yeah.
I mean, even still to this day, when I turn on the water or flush the toilet, I still have flashbacks, being able to do that. 'Cause
do you like it, or do you miss the off the?
Oh, I do it. I do it again if I could, but it wouldn't be in Arizona for sure. I mean, I definitely like to go to a place that maybe has trees, a river, something that doesn't look like Mars.
Yeah. You're not into the Southwest palette then?
I mean, I got it out of my system. I mean, there was a lot of it that I really did like, but I mean, it was high desert, really.
Yeah.
Is kind of a lot of it looks a lot like where I'm at now in Bend in Oregon. A lot of giant bonsai trees, you know, the sand.
Hmm. So yeah, it's you know, getting getting through it, and then like one of the things that remember thinking about towards the end of my schooling was that I had focused so much time and energy on getting myself through it, just to find it, get it, and make it through and survive, that like it didn't hit me till like the last 7 or 8 months or so, where I was like, I'm almost done. Oh my god, I achieved what I thought was impossible. Now what? Where do I go?
You
What do
kind of feel like
I?
you're enduring fallout, right?
Yeah, it's like, oh shit, like I actually did what I didn't think I was gonna be able to do. I was like, did you have that moment, or are you still having that moment where it's like, where do I go from here? What am I doing? You know, like.
God, that is such a multifaceted question. Because when I left, I actually wanted to stay. It was like I didn't feel like I had so much more to learn.
Yeah.
But that goes on really forever. But at the same time, I'm glad that I left, and I mean, I feel like, yeah, in some ways, I feel like there's still much more I could learn, I could have benefited from. But at the same time, I kind of, agree, like what Robert Henri says in his book, that essentially that, all education is self-education, and in looking back, I mean, there's a lot of things that I appreciate in the way that I was taught. And then there's a lot of things that I totally wouldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know, I feel like I know, but it's right now, I guess I feel like I'm in a place where I just have to like somehow redefine the gap between where I am and now with compared to where I want to be. So it's very sculptural, I guess. It's one way of looking at it.
Yeah, and I've wondered if this was sort of indicative of just the Atelier system in general, regardless of where you go. Anytime you're applying a sort of method, especially a rigorous method, it's going to undoubtedly stick with you, when you leave. And there's a degree of sort of shaking it off. I feel like that, like,
right.
Even I feel like I'm still doing it, like,
yeah.
It
kind of in a strange way, it's like, I feel like I wanted Juliet to teach me how to paint. So eventually in the end, I know how not to paint like her. Because really, I mean, not really, because it's like you can see people's, education, well into their career, unless they make, cognitive choices not to paint in the way that they used to. I mean, you can tell when someone was from GCA. You can tell when somebody was from Florence. You could tell when somebody went to the Angel Academy. It's like, I mean, why would I want to paint like Juliet? I mean, there's already thousands of people already trying to do that, and she already does it. Don't you think that like the world wants to see the way that I paint, or want to,
Yeah, and sort of figuring that out is like groping in the dark, because it's like, well, how do I want to paint? And it's like, I don't know. And then it's like, well, the only thing to do is to just keep painting and see what happens and go with what you like, and then it evolves and changes from there. But yeah, there's this. It's like mirroring or mimicking thought process, and like,
right.
So it's like, to this day, Matt or even Josh or Magda, like, I'll hear them speak in the back of my head, to this day. It's like,
oh God, yeah. I mean, I still have I probably still have emotional scars from that. And it's like, stop bothering me. It's like, I know what you want. This is what I want. But yeah, I mean, just to even give you like a small example, like, well, personally, I've been finding myself being very drawn to a lot of even Baroque work. And if you look at their shadows, for example, they're pretty much flat black, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And you come from a school like where Juliet is, and she's known to keep her shadows very hot and the cold's very light. And you look at a lot of her work, her shadows, her reflective light are very, very hot. And I mean, I think that's a very useful way of, looking at, looking things and using that as part of your process for building a painting.
Mm-hmm.
But, what do you do when you want to, cultivate, a different environment, different lighting, whether it's indoors or outdoors. I like to be able to have, a multiple skill set, so then it will help facilitate, my long-term goal in whatever, direction I want to take it,
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, plenty of instances where like we'd be in Lightroom and sometimes the, she would come in and like pull up all the blinds, and depending on what day it is, the lights, change all the time. And TA would come by and look at my painting and be like, you're supposed to make that, your shadows, hotter. They're supposed to be darker. You're not supposed to add white. In the back of my mind, it's like, well, I can't paint what isn't there, and you could totally see how this kind of rigid way of looking at things is somehow, every instance, every now and then you'll find instances where this mode of thinking is actually prohibiting you from being able to be reactive to the situation, and
yeah, that's where the danger
in the grand
comes in
scheme of things.
Go ahead.
I was saying that, that's how, you that can be, limiting, and you, in a way, you're passing up a prime opportunity for learning,
Yeah, because then it becomes sort of like mimicking their style as opposed to studying nature, and
Right.
and I wonder if that's just an unavoidable problem of the system itself, which is like you can't not study under a single artist without running into their stylistic choices, and the more experience they get, the further away they become from their origin, which was the very school that they're trying to cultivate. So it's like, so like as an artist, it's like I can imagine it becomes difficult where it's like you're trying to develop your own voice, but at the same time you're trying to maintain an educational model that has to start everyone at the same point, and if it's doing it right, everyone is coming out like with the same base of knowledge that but then eventually isn't what happens and if you were just studying nature, but ends up being what happens if you're just studying if you're studying art through the perceptive lens of this teacher.
Right, because in a strange way, that's kind of that's what learning is.
Yeah.
Something has got to give, in order for you to move forward. And it's especially very difficult to predict when people are, learning isn't, linear and sequential, and especially coming from a multitude of students, and the teacher is in one perspective, and they've gained so much experience, and they know that they're essentially working multiple pathways at the same time, and you can't see that, and the other person is coming here, this person's a newbie, and it's just constantly evolving, and it's so complex you really can't keep track on it. It just kind of I can see how it can easily spiral out in many different ways, but yeah, I can see how in you essentially have to remain, what would be the right word? I mean, you have to have some kind of set of protocol, despite reasoning, despite logic.
Yeah, and I know I know that can wear on teachers and artists, just from what I saw at the Ravenswood. It can be kind of exhausting to sort of maintain that while at the same time changing in your own work. I know Matt Matt had changed his teaching style considerably over the course of when I was going, and I took a small break in between and came back, and some things have changed. Some things have changed, and so it was like, but at the same time, he was also drastically changing things up and heading in directions that, like, like you just never know where you're gonna go, because you get tired of doing things one way, and I remember the last time I visited, he had passages in paint where, like, he had painted with, like, a fork. It was hilarious. Brilliant passages. Brilliant passages. He's, like, experimenting with all these neon colors and these vivid muted tones, and he's like, yeah, check this out, look over here. And it was a hand that he literally painted a hand with a fork. It was just like this mini fork, and he was like, I had it laying there on the table, and I was sitting there, and I was like, oh, I bet you I could paint that hand with that thing, and I just did it. And it was so funny. It was like, you'd never in your right mind.
That's like Nerdrum territory right there.
Yeah,
I mean, I would hear tales where he would, like, stitch on, like, extra pieces of linen, or they'd, like, cut out a square, or, like, dig in his fingers, in the paint, and the paint was, like, so thick, and then he would, like, move like a whole eyeball, like, an inch or two away. I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Or watch him take razor blades to his paintings. That's always fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's fun to experiment, but yeah, you can't see where you're gonna, who knows.
and you're in a very vulnerable position, because it's like you're not necessarily, for it or against it. You're just trying to gain your bearings to figure. You're just trying to understand why.
Yeah.
Just tell me why, and I'll do it.
Just tell me why. Why is this happening to me? Yeah, I felt like that many times. You're just being exposed to this, like, eccentric genius as they, like, I don't know, the gateway to this world, is being opened up by these people who are just so unique. That's the only way you can describe it. I think every atelier is probably different all over. Well, at the same time, they're kind of the same, but, like, just the unique quality of how kooky whatever teacher happens to be teaching at the time.
Right.
But yeah, I had, what you were talking about with, like, the shadows and whatnot. I had a similar experience where with like, vivid shadows, and they're making it up for the purposes of their work of art, but you're trying to study it as far as nature goes. And I just remember having the experience where this is where Josh and I clicked, where it's like, well, I'm gonna go outside. And every time I went outside to landscape paint, got my ass handed to me, and every time I'd go back into the studio, it helped out drastically. It was like, oh my god, like seeing with a fresh pair of eyes, just the new stimulation.
It's really crazy how a lot of the basic core principles connect to many other ways that you would apply, like if you maybe strictly just worked with the figure or worked with still lifes, that somehow they do creep into, like, landscapes, and narratives. It's really mind-blowing. Yeah, I remember one time, a couple times actually, during, it was my first year, and we were in Life Room, and how generally, when you begin your block in, you have to figure out your notional space, right? You figure out, your bottom, your top, and your midpoint, right? And you have your gesture, you make sure to always use straight lines, all that jazz. And Juliet would come by, and I remember there was we were doing this one, I think it was a contrapposto, and she came by and she just took my charcoal and she just added, like, an extra, like, 3 inches of leg below my bottom line. And I'm like, well, you told us not to do that. If there's a problem in our measuring, we should go back. And then she would just, like, walk away. I'm like, that's like, I'm not, you're like, you're not trying to argue, you just want to understand. And she was just very, very cryptic, very, very direct.
Yeah.
Very amusing now, but very frustrating at the time.
Yeah.
It's like one thing can be right one day, and then another day it's nope.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I oh man, we We used to crack jokes about that about Magda, because she would be the one you'd have to be afraid of more than anything. Matt would get in your head. He'd stand behind you and be like, "Oh, forget I'm here," and then just stand behind you, and then you're like, "Ah, oh, fuck, he's behind me," and then now you have to make all these decisions while he's watching you, and then he'd be like,
Right.
and then he'd just be like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, we had a TA that did that, but I'd find myself like I know you're behind me, dude. So I would like try to like maybe I don't know work on part of the drawing or painting that wasn't as important. It's like please come on, please go away because I
Please
never
go
could
away.
quite get back in the zone.
Yeah. But yeah, it's sort of like knowing. The more experience you get, the more it's like I know there's that awkward point in the training where like you start to get enough experience to be able to employ faster, not tricks, but to start combining things and save time essentially. Like you don't have to do the same thing over and over again, the same method over and over again. At some point it's like, okay, I know. And then it's like but you're going through the motions of
Right.
doing this
It becomes
thing.
like shorthand.
Yeah, and then they're like, "What are you doing? Do it the faster way." And you're like, "But I didn't know I was supposed to do it that way." Allowing, yeah, and then
Yeah, I guess eventually you get a tough skin over a time, and you get to a point where I don't know, me personally, I got to a point where I was like so focused. I mean, there could be like literally a murder going on right next to me, and the lights would fall down or drapes would fall or something would happen to the model stand or people would be crashing into easels and I'm just plugging away. But that took so much effort in itself just to be able just to think about where you are, what you want to accomplish, and so forth.
So after having gotten the education that you've gotten and knowing and you're essentially learning how to see, but have you noticed that sort of alter your taste in art? I remember looking at artists who I really admired before I got into that program. Like I was really a fan of William Whitaker. I think Whitaker. Yeah, that's
It sounds familiar.
and he's a fantastic artist. Just I'm not gonna trash talk him. It's just other than he does very similar kind of nudes and just really basic simple space, and then incorporates really minor sort of elements in there. Just nothing complicated, and I really admired his work. And then it's one of those things like where you go to school and then you come back and it's like, and then you look at artists that you used to admire
Just
and
wore off.
you're just like, oh, maybe why did I
Yeah,
like them
I
so
felt
much?
I actually felt that way about like Gottfried Helmwein and Jeremy
Yeah.
Gadess.
Yeah,
And, I mean, they're great, but then it's like, I mean, I can see why I appreciated it, but yeah, I mean, I've definitely grown since then. I don't know. A lot of people might not like me for saying this, but I mean, nowadays, I mean, I actually can't stand Sargent or I mean, it's one of those things that it's like you hear about it and people say it's awesome, but then you kind of think like in the same way, like, is Michelangelo awesome? Because he really is,
Yeah.
or because everybody else is telling you that he is. Whether he really is or not is kind of besides the point. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel like people are treating Sargent. It's like they'll say like, well, yeah, he uses sharp edges all the time where they shouldn't be, but somehow he makes it work. And it's like, or do you really think that? Do you really see that, or you're just being told that?
Yeah.
It's become almost like a cult.
Yeah.
That.
Oh yeah.
Like even with Wyatt too, it's like, I mean, Juliet loved Andrew Wyatt. I fucking hate Andrew Wyatt. It's just terrible.
I'm not going to judge you for that. It's fine. I totally get you, man. There's a couple staple names that get thrown around, and like the lack and the that whole school going back, it's like, this reverential, that people are going nuts over. And then and Rembrandt, like, there's so much talk. Like, if you ever are in a room with a Rembrandt acolyte, it. It's just like there's
Oh, I know a few.
oh,
I know a few.
you're
Yeah.
just like, God damn, I love Rembrandt, but just would you shut up?
It's like it had its place in time. It's kind of like the same way I kind of feel like, well, like even with Odd Nerdrum,
Yeah.
when people try to paint like Odd Nerdrum, it's like Odd Nerdrum found his path. It took a lifetime of experience to cultivate what he wanted to express.
Mm-hmm.
And for you to, for anybody really to follow in that way, it seems kind of rather like a vain echo chamber. It's like, why would you want to do that? The idea is to be able to, redefine who you are and what you want to say. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like a deeply inherent responsibility as an artist.
Yeah, and don't we see that kind of play out though in like Impressionism, where the earlier you go in the movement, the more you have artists who actually had traditional training sort of branching out, and then the later on you go, the less that becomes true, and everyone's just trying to copy the last guy. Like when people try to copy Picasso, but they don't have a lick of classical education. It's like, you have no idea what you're doing. You have no idea. Cubist paintings are really difficult, are extremely difficult. If you look at what he's doing and the breaking down of shapes, and you're trying to copy that, and you're not once do you have any idea how he's translating this classical approach, because the classical method is one of the more abstract ways that you could ever approach painting. It's completely abstract. It's breaking down a form to manageable shapes, form of infinite complexity into a manageable abstract shape.
Right.
And
it's really only the beginning, really. It's kind of like learning, the alphabet, really.
Yeah. But yeah.
But in that same way, I feel like, like I said, I absolutely loathe Wyatt, but I can appreciate his goal and what he was trying to accomplish. Like Juliet would talk about him, how he was like trying to express seeing and experiencing the world as if the viewer was looking at the world through the corner of his eye. And when she said that, I like totally blew me away. It's like, yeah, you're looking at something generally, peripheral. It's not necessarily from the way that we would, normally try to look at something to understand it, directly. It was just very, it just kind of threw me for a loop there. But, or even like with Robert Henri. I mean, after reading his book, I thought it was very, very profound, very deep, but I mean, I think they're terrible paintings, but his philosophy about what he was trying to achieve was awesome.
Yeah, and that's a thing in itself, the whole aesthetics, and I feel like there are art forms that have branched out just to be manifestations of someone's philosophical ideas, and maybe that's really what abstract art in its essence is going for, and it's just sort of become distorted over time.
Right.
Sort of trying to embody a strange set of ideas. But
I think it really boils down to sincerity, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's plenty of paintings that I would absolutely hate, but could respect because I could see what the person was trying to convey. Mm-hmm. I mean, even if it's not as clear as, maybe if that person didn't reach that goal as clear as they wanted to, you can still see their motive,
Yeah, and sincerity, like I felt it's weird how those emotions like that can come through in a painting, and it becomes a subject of the painting that was never it's never expressed in other than like maybe how the paint is handled and how attentive everything has been taken to. I've seen Jerome paintings where it's like everything has been loved so much. Like this, you could tell that he absolutely loved what he was doing. Like, but you would never get that just looking at a reproduction. You see
right.
The painting is just like, oh my God, like he cared for every millimeter.
Right. Yeah, it really connected to me when like when Jordan Peterson was talking about the connection of, having this, this physical embodiment, this physical thing that can be as represented as like a, a mode of being, that can somehow, its physicalness can somehow transcend, time itself.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that's compacted together, it's goes beyond what what we physically see.
Yeah, yeah, and in vein with Peterson, because I know you love him and I love him too. He's fantastic. But as far as analyzing art, I have read a lot of anthropologists and a decent amount of art historians, and he's out of all of them, he gives some of the most comprehensive interpretations, psychological interpretations of the meaning behind artwork that I've ever seen. And when you look, and it speaks to sort of like when you're working with representational art, based on going back to what you were saying, you're working with representational art, you're also tapping into this deep sort of instinctual knowledge that we all have of human form and nonverbal communication and sort of like an emotional states as translated through the shapes of the figure
Right.
and gesture and all these things that come together. So you're operating within this sort of like unspoken.
It's like somehow these archetypes are like deeply embedded within our DNA and our being.
Yeah.
That these modes of knowledge are something that essentially transcend. It even coincide with science itself, and it's something that necessarily can't be completely cognitive to us, at least in our current state of being.
Definitely. And that speaks to a repeated theme throughout history of artists speaking to how important it is that their work transcends words. In other words, there's this transcendent sort of knowledge that you read. I mean, love reading artists of the past and their thoughts on their work. The Delacroix journals. If you've ever gotten a chance to read those, the journal of Eugene Delacroix is fantastic to read their own thoughts.
No, I
on
remember
their
you.
own
I remember.
work.
I remember mentioning him in a post a while ago. I never read him, but I think you wrote something about how he would like chew himself out for like he had certain habits, and they would get in the way of his ultimate goal. And I'm like, yeah, that's how I've always felt. I mean, that's kind of how I felt like during my Atelier training. I would do something, or maybe I would go out and have dinner, or something, and I'd be like, I could be painting, and then I would like go through this, inner cycle of chewing myself out.
Oh yeah, he would always chastise himself for getting caught up in whatever petty novel or novella or whatever book, cheesy romance book that he might have been reading at the time, and he would always chastise himself. And it's so funny because it's the same thing I would do for like like getting hooked into a video game and being like, I'm just gonna blow this afternoon off and take a break, and then after the fact being like, go through to say all the same things to yourself. But no, you never back onto the artists like being sort of attached to paintings or painters. It's weird because I could easily see like everyone has their favorites, right? And it's kind of hard because like the more power the more successful you become as a teacher, the more you want to like sort of share your passion. But then after a while, that passion is just like, it's like, oh, shut up already. But like, you never forget like the painters that like just blew you away. And for me, it was like Rubens and Bouguereau, but, and everybody, and then Bouguereau is one of those artists too, where I could see like, it's just be like, oh, would you shut up already about Bouguereau? I'm tired of hearing about how amazing Bouguereau was. But Bouguereau for me was like the first painting. Like I'd never known Bouguereau existed until I saw this painting, and it's like life size Homer, like holy shit. And I'm just crying because I didn't know a human being could do that, and
I felt that way with his I don't know the exact title. It's one of his famous ones with the satyr and the nymphs.
Oh yeah. And you see it.
I saw that. You see it, and it's like that's sex. That's that's I want to fuck that painting. That is
Yeah.
like that is it.
Yeah, you want to eat it. Like I always
Yeah,
like when I see paintings that you see these beautiful passages, I want to eat those paintings. Like, but then it's weird because they kind of get into you because like I'm always fighting the sort of French classical bug that I got bit with ever since Bougro, and so I sense it even in myself where it's like I just find myself aiming for that. When I'm engaged in like my longer works, and it's I so it can be really difficult to sort of shake because I want to shake because like you said it before perfectly. It's like I don't want to paint like Bougro. I don't want to paint like Sargent. I don't want to paint like any of those guys. I want to paint like me. And I want to stop by and see what they're doing and how they did it and take some lessons from it and then keep on going. But I don't want to spend my whole career just saying the same damn thing because that often is what ends up happening. It's like, well,
right.
you start saying the
Like
same things.
yeah, and even in your your practice and the way that you think about approaching your painting, your goal, and it's like you get locked into these modes of you kind of like you just keep constantly breaking everything down all the time. Kind of like the way like one would do master copies or color grid studies and like what Richard Schmidt would do. And I totally agree with that. I think that those are invaluable. Or kind of like the way people get swept up in mediums and brushes, and it's like that's like a rabbit hole that will never end, and you just get to a point where you're kind of like prepping upon prepping upon prepping, and then it's like you just you just have to like stop and just go for it. You have to jump into it.
Yeah, I feel like it's weird when you say that. It makes me think of like how people you can see them get swallowed up into like there's about 100 different rabbit holes you could fall down into just in starting to train like classically because and I often watch that happen with people with the chemistry of it, which is fascinating in itself, like the pigments and the mixing and the and everything, all that, or this organic sort of make it myself kind of feel, going back to our roots kind of mentality, and then they never paint because
Right.
they're doing nothing but like prep work for all.
Right. I even knew I had a couple of classmates. They would they would come in after lunch, and after we had light room for the day, and in the afternoon, the people were in their first year. They'd be either working on their cast drawings or bar plates, master copies, and depending on what year you were in for painting, you would maybe be working on a trompe l'oeil or still life or or some color studies. And I knew a couple people that they would just endlessly make color and value strings, and they'd mix everything up just so intricately, and then before they know it, it was already 4:30 and everybody's ready to go home. And they didn't paint anything. And it's like you try to, I mean, you're not in a position to correct anybody, but you're trying to show them, you see what you're doing here. I mean, but and everybody has their own path, but eventually it just becomes insanity where you're just like breaking everything down into this sterile scientific way of looking at the world. And that it's kind of like, that's kind of like a vehicle, really. It's a means to an end. It's not the end of itself. But yeah, it's really easy to get swallowed up.
Definitely. Yeah. So what are some of the do you have any themes, anything exciting that you're thinking about that you're looking to get into, or you just trying to work yourself to the next level, or as far as in your practice, what do
you mean like as far as like subject matter or
yeah, just in general, and are you thinking about exploring different something else, or away from? I don't know, because you're starting to do
Well,
some still lifes and whatnot.
yeah, that's kind of, I admit that's kind of been kind of like my fallback right now where I'm currently at. I
Hmm.
mean, I know where I want to go. Eventually, I'd like to do a lot larger scale work, you
Hmm.
know, and I definitely want to get back into the figure. Where I'm at now. It's pretty hard to get models, you know, and I'd like to eventually do, you know, narratives and interiors. But yeah, right now, I guess I'm kind of been focusing a lot more on like a more directive approach,
Hmm.
more like my I guess it's more of a technical aspect of things to help facilitate, you know, my more long-term work right now. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if anybody really were to ask me if I'm happy with the work that I'm doing now, I mean, I'd be lying if I say that I am.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, like I said earlier, I'm trying to like bridge the gap from where I am now to, you know, where I want to be.
Yeah, and that's hey, that's good. That's great.
But I mean, you know, it's like I got notebooks, you know, stacked of all different kinds of ideas. So I mean, like
Rock
I
on.
don't foresee myself going through a drought anytime soon. It's just like, yeah, I just need the proper conditions, I
Yeah.
guess, in order to do that.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, that's always good to hear though, man, because I'm the same way. I'm looking at them right now. I have a stack of notebooks myself, where it's like I don't understand the painters who don't, and I've met more of them than I would have liked to admit. Where it's like I have no idea what to paint next, and I'm like, are you kidding me? I know what I'm going to be painting a year from now. Like
Yeah, yeah,
like I could tell you if you sit me down and have me do some work, I could probably give you in a couple of years what I would be painting. So it's like I'm not even short on ideas. It's like just flip a page and pick one. Like and then we'll go. And
that was the one. Well, that was one of the good things that I feel like I gained from the Atelier too. Is like a really strong work ethic. I mean, there's always something to do. You
mm-hmm,
know,
mm-hmm.
you're never idle, and it gets in you. You know, it just becomes, I don't know, it just becomes instinctive, really.
Learning how to work when you don't want to work like
Right.
is really
Yeah.
important. It's like if I'm having a really bad day but I need to get something done, it's like you said, it's like you can learning the process, you can just then sort of pick something that fits, because yeah, there's always something to be done. So it's like if I really not feeling like painting, or I'm not feeling like precise painting, then I could do something that requires just very loose work. And I don't feel like painting at all, then it's like there's sketching to do and there's composing to do.
Right.
And if I can't do that, then I can write about it. So there's always something. There's always. So yeah, never ends, which is great.
So yeah, it's like, yeah, I've been in positions where like if I'm still awake enough but not sharp, like to do painting, like maybe I'll, you know, prep panels, or I'll maybe mix my palette, or whatever. It's just, there's always something.
Yeah. So you have a website then,
It's
and
it's in progress right now. It's off of Weebly. I think it's like James Zen Artist, CEN Artist dot Weebly.
okay, all
Um,
right,
for now, and everything's, of course, on social media, Facebook,
all right,
Instagram. If you look, you know,
excellent, excellent.
Facebook.com/James Zen Artist, you'll find me. I mean, there's I think I still have it on there. There was a painting Juliet did of me. I think it was in California, and pretty popular one. So yeah, I imagine I'm not too hard to find.
That's what's that? What's that like? I mean, I mean, because it's like you think about like years and years before, you seeing this person of this kind of skill, and it's like, oh my God, and then and then to be painted by that same
It's
person.
it's really weird. It's obviously me, but at the same time, it's like it's its own identity.
Hmm.
You know. Um, I mean, it was great. It was a wonderful experience, and I mean, I'm glad the way that it turned out. But yeah, it was a very odd experience.
Yeah. What?
It's really hard, really.
You mind sharing a little bit of that, or?
No, no, not at all. I mean, it's went by relatively quick. It was very chaotic in a way because it wasn't like she was working on it every day. I mean, sometimes we do like a couple hours here, maybe skip a couple days, and then maybe she'd work for like 3-4 hours on it. But yeah, roughly it was like 5 weeks, and she's always burning the candle at both ends. And if she's not working on one project, writing a book, then she's teaching class, and if not, then she's dealing with her family or she's traveling or whatever. But yeah, it's very, very strange, but very unique opportunity in that not really a whole lot of people get to be that close with her working and being able to just have a normal discussion. It was very it was a real nice experience. It was very, very rare. So I mean, I jumped on that, but yeah, it's as far as being able to like see myself, through someone else's eyes, I mean, it was definitely an honor. But yeah, I don't know. It's really crazy. And I go ahead.
Oh no. Go ahead.
It's just something that I think I'd actually cherish for the rest of my life. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of being a dead guy, actually two dead guys in one of Matt's paintings, and there's something oddly intimate about, in a really weird sort of way, and I don't mean intimate in like the traditional sense that people think of it, but like to be there quietly getting studied.
It's almost like you can feel their eyeballs.
Right? Yeah. Like you can feel them studying you, and then you know that they're studying you, and then but you also, unlike just a normal model, sort of how they're thinking about studying, how they're doing it. You have some insight into how they're doing it, if you don't fully understand it, and
right.
And so then you see it happen, and you're sort of, yeah, it's just really, really, cause being there sort of quietly while they're working and watching their working methods, which are all sort of very personal things, and yeah, just the whole experience. Yeah, I could see. Yeah, well, I mean, that is a great honor, and she did a fantastic job. I mean,
You mentioned the pose was pretty easy to hold too, being a dead guy.
Oh yeah. Well, with Matt, you never got anything sort of normal, so it was like, you're gonna be a dead guy who had just been writhing. So it's like, well, okay, time to, yeah, but yeah, it wasn't bad. It was fun.
Yeah, I remember when I was posing, I mean, there were some good days and there were some bad days. I mean, she would tell me how amazed at how still I could hold it. Then other days she would be constantly like, "Oh, your chin's going down constantly. Will you move your hand up, please?" And I mean, she makes it look easy, but yeah, I mean, it was just real crazy how you can just kind of, especially with, I guess, with modeling in general, you kind of get real easy to get stuck in your head real quick. It can be very, very introspective experience.
It is. It's sort of like becoming hyper aware of every physicality. It's like, I'm breathing heavy. Can they know?
Right.
Do they know I'm breathing heavy? I'm blushing. I like the slightest little thing. Like, yeah, it's. I've been a model.
And it wouldn't even matter on what the pose. You could just be sitting there. I remember plenty of instances like my whole right leg would be like on fire just because of the maybe I was sitting funny and I didn't realize it until like 10-15 minutes into the pose.
It's far more complicated than people would think. being a model, especially for somebody that the more talented they get, I feel like the more talented the artist gets, the stranger it becomes.
No doubt.
All right. Well, cool. Well, thank you, and thank you for taking time to chat. And yeah.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for for this opportunity. I've never been interviewed before, so yeah, it's been quite pleasurable.
Nice. Well, I'm glad. And so yeah, well, hopefully we can do this again. And yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So thank everybody. Thank you to everybody for listening. And this is concludes another episode of the podcast. So I'll be
Awesome.
talking at you guys later.